इतना बढ़ा दिया कि दे डोंट हैव टाइम फॉर द फैमिली। वो पैसे का करना क्या है, सैलरी पैकेज इज टू गुड, रेट रेस शुरू हो गया है, फैमिली के जो टेंशन है डू वी एड्रेस इन अ कॉर्पोरेट, divorce rate is going up and up in the family. How a person can be happy if he's not happy in the family? So it is none of the concern of the corporate sectors. They should focus HR. अरे भाई, एक happy employee is a productive employee. Like IBM, they have introduced before COVID also. उन्होंने कहा वर्क फ्रॉम होम, अभी तो हमें मजबूरी में करना पड़ा वर्क फ्रॉम होम। देयर आर सो दैट इफ यू एम्प्लॉय और इफ यू रिक्रूट अ फीमेल मैन पावर, इफ दे कैन स्टे एट होम एंड इफ योर वर्क इज नॉट सफरिंग, अलाउ देम, व्हाई यू आर। बट हमने टाइम बढ़ा दिया है। तो अभी बहुत बड़ा एक जो है पोस्ट कोविड जो आया है, इम्पोस्टर सिंड्रोम। एक इम्पोस्टर सिंड्रोम इज ए काइंड ऑफ ए सिंड्रोम कि जहां हर आदमी को लगने लगा, काफी ये बड़ी रिसर्च हुई साइकोलॉजिस्ट के द्वारा, कि एवरीबॉडी फील्स दैट आई एम नॉट केपेबल। मे बी कोविड हुआ, उसके बाद कि अभी करना क्या है, अभी करना क्या है। तो वो सारा का सारा अभी कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर्स को दे शुड फोकस विद द हेल्प ऑफ द एचआर, दे हैव टू डिजाइन एचआर सिस्टम लाइक दैट। थर्ड जो बहुत बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है, एथिक्स, बिजनेस एथिक्स। अब एथिक्स को दो इट हैज मोर कंसर्न विद द एजुकेशन, बट हमने क्या हुआ, मैनेजमेंट एजुकेशन स्पेशली उसको लिंक कर दिया पैकेज के साथ। और व्हेन पैकेज, तो नाउ लुक एट द प्रोडक्ट। अच्छे अच्छे कॉलेज के एमबीए करे विद्यार्थी, हाउ दे आर रनिंग द कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर्स, वो क्या कर रहे हैं। लेमन ब्रदर्स इज अ वेरी गुड एग्जाम्पल, दे हैव गिवन द रिसेशन टू द होल वर्ल्ड। तो ये रोल ऑफ मैनेजमेंट एजुकेशन इज आल्सो वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। रिसेंटली आई अप्रिशिएट द इनिशिएटिव ऑफ द AKTU, UP Technical University. They have introduced a course curriculum and they are serious about the human values. देखिए इस देश में हमें, yes we need Adani and Ambani, but we need to respect the teaching of the Vivekanand, who said if there is one single person hungry on earth, then the whole society is responsible and we are all traitors. तो वो उसको reinforce करना ही पड़ेगा। जो पहले एजुकेशन के बाहर एक लिखा जाता था, मैं बड़ा छोटे स्कूल्स में पढ़ा हूँ, छोटे टाउन से, तो बाहर बहुत अच्छे से लिखा हुआ होता था, शिक्षार्थ आइए सेवार्थ जाइए। अभी नहीं है। नाउ आई एम टीचिंग इन अ मैनेजमेंट कॉलेज, वी डोंट टॉक अबाउट सेवार्थ जाइए, वी से आइए एंड इतना पैकेज पाइए। तो एवरीथिंग इज लिंक्ड विद द मनी। शुभ लाभ वो तो खत्म ही चला गया। आई रेड ए स्टोरी इन माई चाइल्डहुड कि अगर एक चोर अगर चुराएगा, भूखा चोर, तो एक अनाज की बोरी चुराएगा, लेकिन एक पढ़ा लिखा विद्यार्थी अगर चुराएगा तो पूरी की पूरी गाड़ी चुराएगा। तो विच वी नीड टू फोकस कि कैसे हम थोड़ा सा इम्बाइब करें कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर्स का। नेक्स्ट जो इश्यू है विच इज आल्सो वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड कंसर्न, सोशल रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द बिजनेस हाउसेस। Very very important, sir. When we look at the climate, I don't know what impact of our bad habits, corona, हमने इतना खराब कर दिया था एनवायरमेंट को। कोरोना, if you look from the different angle, was a God also was trying to give a lot of lessons during this COVID period. Unfortunately, there was a lockdown, but you see there was a lot of changes in the climate. Now अभी क्या हो रहा, look at the quality of the air, look at the quality of the water, पैकेजिंग सिस्टम जितना हमने करके कितना कूड़ा हम पैदा कर रहे हैं, सड़कों पे पैदा कर रहे हैं। मुझे डर लगता है किसी दिन हम बैठ के कूड़े के ढेर पे बैठ के बात कर रहे होंगे। We celebrated recently on yesterday water day. Look at the quality of the water और क्या इसका फ्यूचर होगा, तो बहुत सोच के थोड़ा सा डर लगता है। तो आई थिंक all multinational or business houses corporate houses, they should focus. अब recently I appreciate, ऐसा नहीं है कि गवर्नमेंट कुछ नहीं कर रही है, recently गवर्नमेंट इनिशिएटिव I appreciate construction in the field of auto. तो जिस तरीके से हमारी गवर्नमेंट अभी थोड़ा सीरियस हुई है क्लाइमेट को लेके, वो दे आर ट्राइंग टू क्रिएट क्लाइमेट चेंज, सेल्फ रिलायंट इन टेक्नोलॉजी पे ऑटो में जो काम हो रहा है, इलेक्ट्रिकल ऑटो डेवलपमेंट का, दैट कैन बी अप्रिशिएटेड. एक बहुत सीरियस इश्यू जो कॉर्पोरेट के लिए, आई वांट टू टॉक फ्रॉम द कॉर्पोरेट एंगल्स आल्सो, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ प्रॉब्लम दे आर फेसिंग, लाइक रिजर्वेशन पॉलिसीज. In Haryana government, there was a decision of the government because उनको वोट खरीदना था, तो उन्होंने कहा 75% population will be of the Haryana will be allowed only in the corporate sector to work. There was restlessness in the corporate sector. They went to the court, high court में गए, हाई कोर्ट ने उस पे स्टे ऑर्डर दे दिया, लेकिन अभी रिसेंटली उसने सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा वो स्टे ऑर्डर को रद्द कर दिया. बट दे आस्क फॉर द रिव्यू. इफ दिस विल बी अलाउड, देन वी कैन सी, जो हम लोग मल्टीनेशनल कंपनीज को इनवाइट करते हैं, एंड रिसेंटली वी हैव सीन मारुति का जो केस हुआ था हरियाणा के अंदर, दैट वाज सो अनफॉर्चुनेट. एक एचआर मैनेजर को जला दिया गया था, वी ऑल रिमेंबर. तो हम लोकल पॉपुलेशन को एम्प्लॉय करके क्या मैसेज देना चाहते हैं, आई डोंट नो. व्हाट वी नीड टू डू, वो करना क्या है कि हमें गवर्नमेंट को अगर करना है तो वी नीड टू क्रिएट मोर जॉब्स, मे बी वी नीड टू क्रिएट एंटरप्रेन्योर. ये जो इंस्पेक्टर राज, इफ इट इज अलाउड, विल बी बैक अगेन इन हरियाणा, एंड नॉट ओनली इन हरियाणा. वो एक दूसरे को रेट रेस में रहते हैं, स्टेट कंपटीशन रहता है. महाराष्ट्र की वहां पॉलिटिकल पार्टी शिवसेना, दे आल्सो अनाउंस इफ वी आर इन द पावर देन लोकल को जॉब्स हम देंगे. सेम देयर वाज अ मैनिफेस्टो ऑफ अ लोकल ऑफ गोवा पॉलिटिकल पार्टी, कहने का वी विल गिव द एम्प्लॉयमेंट टू द लोकल पीपल. दिस वी हैव टू सी. The government has to take some serious. If government is not able to do because of the political interest, then the Supreme Court should look after that reservation policy. I see a lot of impact because there will be no cross-cultural, and then the local people, because we are also suffering from this problem where I am working. We employed the local people, they have their own mentality, they have their own issues, and they don't want to they want to create problems for everything. Employment is a very, very serious problem, sir. Every 10th, if I talk about the data, every 10th youth of this country is unemployed. जब हम बात करेंगे रिजर्वेशन की, तो उसमें ease of doing business should be more focused. We need to create more entrepreneurs, like what I am doing with the help of the SOS भोजनालय. तो वो अभी हमने 6 लोग करे हैं, तो I have got target of 20 in Agra. तो उसके माध्यम से we are trying to create the job, because I will go, if I will go deeply into stats, so it will take lot of time. After COVID, people have lost their income, और जॉब अभी वो कैच नहीं कर पाए. जो 20 की जो सिचुएशन थी, मार्च 22 में परहैप्स इट वाज डिक्लेयर्ड लॉकडाउन, उसमें जो हालात हुए हैं कॉर्पोरेट्स को, दे हैव टू टेक केयर आल्सो, बिकॉज दो उसका लॉकडाउन का बहाना करके जिस तरीके से उन्होंने एक्सप्लॉयटेशन शुरू किया, दैट वाज अ वेरी वेरी सीरियस इश्यू. सो गांधी की थ्योरी को भी हमें अभी थोड़ा सा याद करना पड़ेगा, रीइंफोर्स करना पड़ेगा कि इंडिया नीड्स प्रोडक्शन बाय द मासेस, नॉट बाय द मास प्रोडक्शन. और वो जो एक थ्योरी हमने कंपटीशन वाली जो पैदा की है, सर्वाइवल ऑफ फिटेस्ट, अभी हमने, बिकॉज अनफॉर्चुनेटली उसी पीरियड में एक रशियन फिलोसोफर, सोशल वर्कर, थिंकर थे.
प्लीज बी ब्रीफ.
ओके, so he said theory of cooperation. So theory of cooperation was not more into the practice. Theory of competition में corporate has also introduced कि भला उसकी कमीज मेरी कमीज से ज्यादा सफेद कैसे. तो ये सारी कुछ एंगल्स हैं. I will not take much time now. I will join later on. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta, for giving your views. And Dr. Gupta is very, very clear. He says there are lots of problems and the reforms are required. But he was insisting on two things. First thing about for the good governance, he says that the corporates have to give good governance. And secondly, he says the reservation policies. Sometimes government is also coming out with such types of policies which are not in accordance with the international standard, or and the companies, multinational companies are facing lots of problem to work. So according to him, it's both the side. The corporates are required to be the corporates reforms are required, but also the government has to change their outlook, not for the vote politics, but for the benefit of the public at large. So thank you very much, Dr. Gupta, for giving your views. Now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he's Mr. Ramnath Pradeep. Mr. Ramnath Pradeep is LLB, postgraduate in economics. He is the former chairman and managing director of Corporation Bank. Mr. Ramnath Pradeep has served the banking industry for more than 37 years in various senior positions. His chairmanship in Corporation Bank had brought numerous awards to the bank. He put the bank on world map by taking keen initiative to partner with Commonwealth Secretariat for financing the youth as a social concern under Corporation Bank, ComSec Youth Enterprise Financing Program. He has also served as Executive Director of Central Bank of India and was also appointed as Chief Vigilance Officer in State Bank of India and Bank of India. In addition, he had also been associated as Chairman of Corporation Bank Limited, Corp Bank Securities Limited, Cent Bank Home Limited, Cent Bank Securities Limited, and member of Board of Central Bank of India and ILFS, besides other companies in the area of finance, information technology, Rolta Group, retail chain, Vadia Group, and Being Human, credit rating advisory services, etc. Currently, he is the chairman of Messrs. Cras Capital Advisors, Messrs. Credit Rating and Risk Advisory Services Private Limited. He is also co-author of book Financial Inclusion, Viable Opportunity in Urban India. Welcome, Mr. Ramnath Pradeep on our show. Mr. Ramnath Pradeep, you have heard of what Dr. Gupta said. And according to him, both sides are responsible, corporates as well as the government, and both has to change their ways so that the good governance will be given by the corporates, and that thus the advantage will be to the general public. Now, you being such a senior person in the banking industry and also on the board of many of the leading industrial houses, we would like to know your views on this corporate reforms in India. Mr. Ramnath Pradeep, please.
Mr. Goel, there are two issues. One is about the corporate governance issue, and another is corporate reforms issue. So I think according to the subject, there is a need of to change the need to look into a corporate reforms rather than corporate governance. Corporate governance is offshoot of the corporate reforms. Now, what are the steps have been taken by the government and as well as the regulatory authority? Because there are two areas which, after the liberalization has taken place, from the socialization to capitalization, we have deliberately moved from the socialization to capitalization. Now, when the capitalization we have adopted as of today, we are, in spite of that, we say we are the socialist country, we are the secular country. In spite of that, your growth of industry has taken place because of your adopting the model of capitalization, which is based upon the American, the model. Based upon that, there are huge challenges which has come, because over a period of time we have learned, we have moved a lot of directions. We have moved in that direction to create a corporate competition, and corporate competition has created a governance issue. Now, one of the area of concern about the governance issue was, which is governed by basically a listed company, which are the big companies which are listed on BSE or NSE. Those are the companies which are governed by the corporate governance issue. Regulatory authority for that is a SEBI. SEBI has been regulating, and after liberalization and in 2014, 2013, after the new act has come, Companies Act has come in 2013, thereafter, a lot of reforms had taken place in terms of legislative reforms as well as the corporate reforms. One of the reform which came into picture for the listed company was introduction of Article 49 in the SEBI, LORD. There is a guidelines issued by the SEBI under which the corporates which was registered with the SEBI are those who are registered with the BSE or NSE. They are supposed to follow certain direction. Those who have raised the the money from the public IPO and they have become a listed company. Now, if you see the listed companies, how they have over a period of time. Earlier, there used to be only 4,500. I got some figure. I don't want to bother with those figure. In 99, when the first reform started, at that time, the listed companies were merely around 4,500. As of today, if you see, there are more than 50,000 listed companies. Now, those listed companies have grown over a period of time, and the public at large has participated in those IPO, and these companies have collected huge public money from the public, in terms of the IPO right to issue and many other things which has been done. At the same time, there was an issue of whether these monies are being utilized for the purposes the money is raised. Earlier, these things were not used, and therefore, the Act was amended, Companies Act was amended, SEBI regulations were amended and brought Article 49, where you are supposed to have certain minimum criteria. Like one of the criteria was recently, because of the pressure from the corporates, SEBI has to agree and modify, because one of the guidelines was that you should split the post of chairman and managing director. Earlier, in every company, chairman and managing director be the same. This has happened with the banking sector. Chairman and managing director, when we were there, we were the chairman and managing director 4. So now, the guidelines came into picture, and certain period was allowed to be adopted, like position of a chairman and the managing director should be split, resulting into chairman will be a highest authority who will take the policy decision, and managing director is the person who will be responsible for day-to-day operation of the company. It has been implemented in the bank, particularly in the public sector bank as well as in the private sector bank. But unfortunately, the time was given till this March, and now this position has been again written back, reversed back, and saying that it is left to the discretion of the board. It is left to the discretion of the board to adopt the position of split the position of a chairman or MD, or should continue as it is, what is there. The majority of the corporates have adopted that the position of a chairman. I am talking about some of the good companies like a Tata Group companies. There are many other group companies, Bajaj Group companies. They have all adopted both the position of a chairman and MD. But majority of the people have not done, including some of the good, the respected group of the companies. They have not adopted because they find their conflict. And therefore, this is an issue, one of the corporate governance issue, that why they should not split the post of MD and the chairman of the company. Second reform which came up is about the directorship. Now the companies, they were directed to have independent director, and for that there is a list of the independent director. There is a organization within the MCA, the Company Corporate Affairs Ministry. There is an organization who is training the people of who wants to become a independent director. There is examination for independent director, and those people can be appointed as independent director, so that the view of independent director is considered really independent. But in practice, I am also independent director of various companies, but in practice, it never happens. Who are those being appointed as independent director? Not from the list of the directors which are prepared by the Corporate Affairs Ministry, but the friend and relatives of the MD and CEO, MD and chairman of the company, who are majority of the time, they are the shareholder of the company. So in practice and in the law is a different, but efforts have been made by the government of India and also by SEBI to create an atmosphere of consultation to implement these decisions. Now, one of the another area which has been reform is keeping the CSR. Mr. Gupta has raised the issue of CSR. Now there is a law, according to that, there is a certain percentage of profit is required to be separated and kept separately in the CSF or CSR activities. And if it is not used for that particular year, it has to be used for the next year. If not done, then next to next year, and otherwise you are not eligible. So that a separate provision is required to be made. These are the reform which has been taken place. Secondly was the appointment of the women directors. Majority of the cases, the women directors, independent directors were not there. As of today, because of this one of the reform which has been undertaken is to have at least minimum certain number of independent director who are women director, and they are all qualified directors. So some of the the reforms which has been taken place has given a lot of independency on the company to decide. But there are issues of in corporate governance, there are issues of corporate reforms, particularly on accounting side. Now, as per the law, as per the CS Institute, as per the Companies Act, you can appoint a statutory auditor for certain specified period with the consent of the AGM. Now, who attends the AGM? When the AGM takes place, I attend majority of the, wherever I am the director, I attend. Hardly 20% people are not attending. 10% people are also not attending the, the AGM meeting. And when the agenda is put for the meeting, it is approved, because as of today, the promoters voting is also considered as one of the votings. So majority gets voted, majority gets approved because of the promoters' voting rights. So one of the suggestions we have given from our side also, that while going for the voting in the AGM and EGM, the promoters' voting rights should be taken aside. Let the real shareholder vote for on these issues. I have seen this also, because there are many institutional, the director, shareholder, institutional director like LIC, banks, many of the things are there, but they don't attend. I have seen this is one of the reason in many of the cases it has happened, because of the institutions are not voting, though they have a full right to vote, they don't participate in the voting, resulting into whatever the promoters have put forth the resolution get passed. So this is one of the area where it needs to be changed to make it that promoters' interest is to be kept separately. Similarly, there is a related party transaction. In majority of the cases today in banking side, majority of the cases the fraud has been declared as willful defaulter has been declared on account of nothing else but the related party transaction, which is required to be reported to the EGM or board, and specific permission from the board, and if necessary from the AGM. People are not obtaining the necessary approval from the related party transaction. In majority of the transaction, you have 10 companies, 20 companies of the same promoter group. Now, definition of same promoter group has been expanded to include many of the relative blood relations, but in spite of it takes place, no permission is obtained, resulting into a lot of cases of diversion has been reported by the bank to CBI. Lot of cases of diversion has been reported to RBI to declare those corporates as a fraud. I am not saying that the corporates are indulging in the fraudulent activities, because they have also to be given. Their interest is also required to put the protection. But as of today, because of the tight guidelines, as of today, tight guidelines is to whom you should declare the willful defaulter. If you have capacity to pay and you are not paying, what is the capacity to pay? Generating sufficient profit. If I have a profit, any corporate who has a profit, why he will not pay to the, why he will not discharge the liability of the lenders? But in the balance sheet, it is required. I have seen many of the balance sheets of many companies. At least in a year, I get a chance to go through the balance sheet of the companies, not less than 20 to 50 companies balance sheet every year. Because I am on the board of some company, I am a shareholder of many of the companies. So I keep on getting those balance sheet. These things are not being reported. So this is a lack of corporate governance on the part of the corporates. and also lack of supervision on the part of regulatory authority. So there is a need to tighten the the supervisory. There is a need to have a control on the supervisory side. There is a need to have a control on the corporate side. Now, at the same time, liberalization has brought a lot of challenges to the corporate. When the competition take place, you are not of a scale level of that nature, but you want to be that particular nature. So a lot of challenges have come for the corporate, which corporate are ready to address those issues. But atmosphere which is required to be created for that, there is a need to action needs to be taken by the company corporate affairs. There is a need to action to be taken by the SEBI. There is action required to be taken by RBI. There are regulatory issues. There are the compliance issue. As of today, one of the area which has been the for any violation in the under the Companies Act, there was a criminal procedure. That apart from the penalty of financial, the penalty which will be also imposed. But during this particular last year, during the COVID period, some bold reforms have also been taken under the Atma Bharat Nirman, or what you call this. Under this category, certain further bold steps have been taken and resulted into the things are being streamlined. As of today, the people are in a position to get liberalization, you have liberty to raise the fund from as and when required. You are also having the liberty to take. Earlier, majority of the industries were under the restricted category. You were not allowed to invite the investment from foreign FDI and other source. As of today, I think every sector has been liberalized in terms of allowing the investor to come from the outside. Now the question is, what is the money coming? That also needs to be seen. I have seen in many of the cases. I don't want to publicly discuss those issues, but as of today, a lot of liberalization has taken place so far. Government is concerned, and the industry should take the full advantage of that, so that new industries is established. Gupta ji has raised the issue of local reservation. These are a little bit political nature, but I don't find it is giving some wrong signal to the people. I find I have seen I go to the rural area. I got some property in the rural area. I always go there. I find there's a construction activity which is taking place. Hotel industry which is managed by these people are locally people. They are well trained now. So the local, it is not necessary that local people will have a problem or reservation is giving. So I don't agree with Gupta sahab. But at the same time, I appreciate, because there is a need to protect them also. If you are taking their land for the industry purposes, which is allowed, now you can take this. Even if you give the market price, what about people who were dependent upon that? If a local employment is given, a lot of things can be generated. So I have other things which we can suggest during the course of our introduction. But I find that India has taken steps in terms of the liberalizing the policies, in terms of the inviting the fund from outside. Your FDI policy has been invited. There are a lot of changes have taken place. One of the things which has taken place, people were struggling, is IBC Act has been brought into picture. Lot of industry consolidation has taken place. Lot of industry has changed hand from one industry to another. So allow those industries to survive, as well as protect the environment, protect the the employment and all other things which are required to run the industry. So a lot of work has been done, and a lot of work need to be done. So reform is one in the corporate sector, because the labor reform is one which still not taken. Law reform is still not taken. There are many other reforms which are required for the benefit of the corporates to develop their industry, has not yet taken place. I think Government of India is moving in the right direction. At least identification of those areas has been completed. Now implementation will take time, probably maybe before 24. Thereafter, after that also there is a lot of time available. So reform will stay in the country. Some correction is required to be done, and corporates are also aware, and people are getting ready. Today corporates are not set, thinking of old days. Now today the corporates, their son and daughters have got well-educated, foreign education. They are all aware of, and they want to adopt this. So we'll move around in the next round whenever there
Okay.
is. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you to all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramnath Pradeep, for giving your views. And Mr. Pradeep says that the government is doing lots of good work in the field of corporate reforms. So let's see how much corporate reforms, and he has given lots of details about those reforms also. So without wasting the time, because of the paucity of time, and the speakers are there, and everyone wants to speak more than the usual time, but no issues. I would like to. But before that, thank you very much, Mr. Ramnath Pradeep. I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he is Mr. R. Kannan. Mr. R. Kannan is the corporate advisor and keynote speaker. He is the ex-TCS, ICICI Bank, and Hinduja Group. Mr. R. Kannan is an expert in finance and strategy with more than 35 years experience. And during his career as a management consultant, as a key member of the corporate headquarters in various corporates, including TCS and PwC as management consultants, Hinduja Group as VP and head of strategy, ICICI Infotech as EVP and head of strategy, ICICI Bank Group as EVP strategy. At present, he is providing corporate and economic advisory services, focusing on central government, state governments, and corporates, including MSMEs. He is a mentor for startups under ADB program. He is a member of expert committee in CII, ASSOCHAM, FICCI, Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Indian Merchants Chamber on committees relating to foreign trade, private equity, industry, economic, banking, transportation, and environment. He was a member of National Task Force on Artificial Intelligence of CII. He had attended programs organized by World Bank, International Institute of Finance, Asian Development, AIIB on international finance. He was a member on the board of studies on SIES, School of Management, for 5 years, and member of Academic Advisory Council in Birla Institute of Management Technology, Greater Noida, for 7 years. Now he is member of Advisory Council of Bhavan's K.M. Munshi Institute of Advanced Studies and Vox School of Management, Hyderabad. He was the president of 75 years old Bombay Tamil Sangam for 3 years. He is visiting faculty in leading management institute on finance strategy, organization restructuring, and turnaround management. He has a personal interest in global and Indian economy and shared his ideas on economic development and economic crisis with the government stakeholders from across the world. And some of the recommendations on crisis resolution and economic development were implemented by the government authorities across the world and Indian government. He has received several awards from different organizations. Welcome, Mr. R. Kannan, on our show. Mr. Kannan, you have heard Dr. Naveen Gupta as well as Mr. Ramnath Pradeep, and both have given their views. Dr. Gupta was a bit apprehensive about the reforms, and he is quite against the reservations policy in corporates, while according to Mr. Ramnath Pradeep, the government is doing very well, and he's supporter of the local reservations because he feels that the locals can be developed like this. Now, we would like to know your views on the corporate reforms in India. Mr. R. Kannan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Shri Goel, for this opportunity. Good morning to all of you. I'm very happy to be speaking in this panel. Coming to corporate reforms, we can look at it from two different perspectives. One is corporate reforms which were forced by government from statutory perspective. And second is the corporate reforms implemented by companies themselves. In fact, if you see in the last 2.5 years, especially after the COVID, I am a speaker in the CFO forums. So whenever we used to speak in the CFO forums, one of the challenges people were saying, CFOs were saying, was that it was very, very difficult to implement the IT systems, digitization, these initiatives, and which would have made the life very simple for management, including CEO. But that was not happening. I was speaking in this forum ever since 2008 crisis happened on how to manage a crisis and economic crisis situation and in companies. And what we found was that companies were really finding it a big challenge to implement these reforms. But I can tell you the last 2 years, what has happened was due to COVID, every company, where it was a large or small or medium, they are all forced to look at how to become lean, how to become more efficient, and they started adopting the best practices. The fact that most of the large listed companies in India, they are able to show much higher profits, even though their sales has not gone up in the last 2 years, or they are at the same level. That shows that there was a lot of slack in the system, which they were able to go and correct in the last 2 years. So this is what I call, when you say corporate reforms, uh, especially as it was mentioned by Sri Pradeep, that corporate governance is part of corporate reforms. So this corporate governance is one of the issues which all of us were dabbling with for all these years. I can say the start of these good corporate governance practices actually started in the year 1956, when Indian government introduced that new industrial policy. New industrial policy. The new industrial policy, what did Indian government do? They classified the industries into 3 types. The one which are reserved for government, one which are reserved for private sector, then both can operate. So that is where actually our corporate governance process started. I can tell you, we all talk about planning and all today. Even when these public sector units were set up, all of you are aware that most of these central public sector units come under about 17 ministries. So these units actually, they were the first one to make plans for 15 years, 20 years, 5 years, etc. And even today, if you go to most of the public sector units, you will find, of course, we can always say that performance compared to private sector is poor. That is due to the culture. But they have a system whereby they have a department for planning. Whereas you go to 80% of private companies today, you will not find a planning department. So I can say that it all started. Actually, the 1956 was the first time when we talk about corporate governance systems and all. When they created a public sector, then the government also created a concept of signing MOUs with these companies, agreeing the targets for performance. So the system was very good. And of course, how it was being implemented and the speed with which it is being implemented, they are different. Even today, if you see, at least in 5-6 sectors, the leading and most efficient companies are in public sector. I would say railways is one good example. NTPC is another example. And some of the oil companies. And BHEL used to be one of the top companies. So still we have 7 or 8 companies which are still very well managed. I can say that they are very well managed. Then coming to the next part, when you talk about corporate governance, it all started after our 1991 liberalization. So this corporate reforms, actually, if you see, there is a need for a corporate reform. It is not that people wanted or government wanted. So when we opened up the economy to everyone, I can tell you there used to be a club called Bombay Club. The Bombay Club, Indian companies, they went and told government, if you are going to liberalize the economy, the Indian companies will die. All the foreign companies will start taking leadership and they'll become #1 companies in India. Similarly, as you are all aware, when a pharma industry, they introduced this product patent in the pharma industry. So most of the Indian companies, in fact, the top 5 companies, if you look at, only 2 Indian companies were there. So all Indian companies went and told government, if you're going to introduce a product patent, Indian companies will not be the leaders. But actually what has happened after the introduction of product patent, we saw a very big opportunity in generics from abroad. And the Indian companies which used to invest only 0.2, 0.3% on R&D in their companies, they started spending 8 to 12% on R&D. So today, if you take all the top 5 companies in pharma, they are all Indian companies. So if you really see the corporate reforms in India, of course, it all started with forming SEBI. As we are all aware, the main objective of SEBI is to protect the investors' interests. So as it was mentioned by Sri Goel and others, and there are several committees which are set up to look at the corporate governance in India. The last one was by Mr. Uday Kotak. So they came up with a lot of recommendations, and CAA also, they brought voluntary guidelines in the beginning for corporates. So they were saying that how to run a corporate. In fact, if you talk about corporate reforms, the basic objective of corporate reform is to ensure that a company is doing very well. It becomes the most competitive in the industry, and it is able to take the leadership position. So that should be the objective of corporate reform. So as a part of that reform, we started talking about corporate governance. And it was already mentioned. So some of the important reforms which were brought were, like I told you, SEBI's main mandate is to protect the interests of the investor. So what used to happen, we are all aware that for any type of resolution to be passed, we have 3 types: simple and extraordinary general meeting, etc., etc. So there, actually, the voice of the minority shareholders, earlier they were not heard. So if somebody had a majority, they are able to pass a resolution, and they are able to implement the decision in a company. So then SEBI came up and said that no, it's not done. So you start looking at minority shareholders. So now minority shareholders are even allowed to act as a group, and as a minority shareholders, they can also go and appoint a director on their behalf. That is one. Second is that, like it was mentioned, whenever you go to AGM, when I was very young, when I was in Chennai, I used to go and attend all these AGMs, especially Ponds and Unilever. I remember when I was very young, I used to go and attend all AGMs. That time I had only 5-6 company shares. But today, I'm not able to even go and attend a single AGM because of the time paucity. So now what was happening again? So if you talk about AGM and passing a resolution in the AGM, the people who are present in the AGM only can vote. And of course, proxies you can send, and based on that, the decision was taken. So then SEBI said, why you restrict? So why don't you allow these people to vote from home? E-voting was allowed. So now SEBI also enabled to make sure that every shareholder is able to participate in an AGM decision by joining a e-voting. So that has happened. Then, of course, listing that 49 regulations were being discussed. So one of the things, again, what we found was that actually in the beginning in India, the corporate reforms had to be really forced by statutory authorities. It was not voluntary by companies. But later on, after seeing a company like Infosys doing extremely well, with the good corporate governance, many of the leading companies in India started adopting best practices. So SEBI had to mandate that you do this, you do that. So then they said that within a board, in fact, today, if you see the powers of a board has been increased several times compared to what it was 10, 15 years ago. So today, power of a board includes, they have to vet the strategy of a company, which means the company has to prepare a strategic plan, and it has to be sent for approval to the board, and board has to approve. Then we know that especially after 2008, a lot of risks have come. So now SEBI has mandated that risk management committees have to be set up by the board, and a company has to identify all the risks, and these risks have to be discussed with the board members, and they have to understand what is the risk of the company, what are risks related to the company, and based on that, what are decision they are going to make, it will be based on that. And third, like Sri Goel was saying, in 2000, 2001, we had a big accounting reporting scandal in USA. And of course, it happens all the time. But only thing, the enormity of that fraud in 2001-2 was very high. Even today, you see that companies are indulging, but the degree to which it impacts the balance sheet or profit, that is a question mark. So what has happened? To make sure that the accounting is proper, the numbers are represented correctly, then SEBI said that there need to be a audit committee. So the audit committee chairman has to be independent director. Of course, the concept of independent director is that he should be totally independent. But I can tell you, as of today in India, most of the independent directors are still associated somewhere or other with the company. But I am sure going forward, as far as we adopt the best practices, even if they are somewhat related, I think the best principles of decision making will be adopted. Then one more thing is related party transaction. We know in India, the company system is very, very complicated. You find that one company has 250 companies, or they have tiered structure. So we don't know which company is doing what and all that. And it's always possible that the company is dealing with the company which is associated.
Please be brief.
Yeah. So what SEBI did was that they brought a lot of regulations on these related party transactions. To conclude in the first part, what we found that the corporate reforms, there are two parts. One done by companies by themselves, especially in the last 2-3 years. Then the corporate reforms which were forced by government. And of course, we have a lot of authorities today, unlike just RBI, which was 30 years ago. Today, we have RBI, SEBI, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. BSE itself is a regulator. NSE itself is a regulator. So we have so many regulators. Now they have appointed a National Financial Reporting Authority. So what we are seeing is that our regulators are becoming more and more proactive. And they are looking at best practices across the world. And they are trying to bring those practices into Indian system. And in fact, I was told that India has got one of the best corporate governance approaches to managing companies in the world. So this is what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Kannan, for giving your views. Paucity of time, I will not summarize. I will go immediately next to our guest panelist. And so thank you, Mr. Kannan, for giving your very, very valuable views. Now, I would like to invite and introduce our next guest panelist, and he is Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi. Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi is the co-founder, Agritech Enablers Private Limited and Bharat to India Connect. His 34 plus years of global experience spanning Fortune 5 company to cutting edge technology startups in IT, telecom services, and social sectors. He was MD and CXO for 18 years in 2 NASDAQ listed companies on a New York Stock Exchange listed company, PE owned and privately owned companies. He helped build over a decade as its founding managing director, India's largest and world-class aftermarket services company, grounds up in startup mode from 2 people to 2,500 plus people in 100 plus cities in 23 states. He, after bidding adieu to corporate world in 2018 at age 53, actively working pro bono along with her spouse, Mrs. Shruti, with small and marginal farmers for organizing them in FPOs and for technology adoption. Welcome, Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi on our show. Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi, you have heard earlier panelists, Dr. Naveen Gupta, Mr. Ramnath Pradeep, and Mr. R. Kannan, and they have given their views clearly about the corporate reforms in India. We would like to know from you, because you have a global exposure as well as in India also, and now you have, although you have left the corporate world, but still your views we would like to know from the corporate reforms in India. Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Goel, for giving me an opportunity to speak on your forum. I will just drop on my experience. So I started this company in 2008 with 2 people, and gotten it up to 3,000 people across 100 plus cities in India. So I traversed from a micro company to a small company to a medium enterprises to a very large enterprises, from zero revenue. And by the time I left 10 years later, about 400 crores, essentially, or $70 million worth of revenue, pure play services revenue, which is incredible. I would like to really start off the first question, which I have in my mind: corporate reforms for who? Who are we really talking about corporate? I keep hearing it is about the investors, and I really don't agree that it's about the investors. It is about the, and if you want to really, I asked this to the global CEO of my company a long time ago. I really want to build a very valuable company in India. And this guy was really, a $10 billion company CEO. And he says, Sanjay, valuable company means different things to different people. So what does it mean to you when you say you want to build a valuable company? So I came back and I said, oh, what should I really figure out? What should I really build as a valuable company? Let me figure that out. And then I came to an answer that the valuable company has to be valuable for everyone, not just for investors. It has to be valuable for people. It has to be valuable for customers. It has to be valuable for your vendors and partners. It has to be valuable for surround where you are. And then it has to be valuable for your shareholders. This is the order which you can't build a valuable company if you change that order. Why we are into such a miserable condition today as far as corporate India, Mr. Goel wanted me to really talk about the global corporate world. Both the I've sat in boardrooms of very, very large companies as part of the team of global leadership. And I know exactly, how they work. So it isn't really that great different in terms of the focus on really return on investment to the investors as far as corporate government. Very few companies will really get into building a very valuable company. So when you talk about corporate reforms, and I'm coming by the experience, right? So hear me out, and I'm not going to be politically correct. Okay, and I'm going to be scathing because this is my experience I had, just to give you a perspective. We didn't build a 2-bit company. This was a world-class company, measured, audited, certified by the most stringent ICT standards for 9 of the 10 years of experience. And this company was built by 10th graders, 12th grader, ITIs, and diploma holders. Not IIM guys, not single IIM, not single IIT guys. We scaled it up from 0 to 3,000 employees plus, with 40 marquee customers. You can pick an ICT brand, they were my customers. So that's why I'm so, proud about what we did. Not we, not I, we with 8th grader, 10th grader, 12th grader coming out of villages. 80% of my employees were coming out of rural India. I ran 100% above board business, 100% above board, not a blemish, not one single audit objection from the government, not one single tax chori from the government, 100% above board. 100% above board for the employees, 100% above board for the customers, 100% above board for the vendor partners. That's how we built really this company. When we start talking about employees, there's no one, except for Mr. Gupta, sorry about that. None of you folks really talked about employees. Every single company, without exception, you name an Indian company, they are absolutely cheating from their employees. 100%. I can challenge you. I worked with the topmost company, pick a name, and I worked with that company. None of these guys will ever ensure that the subcontract, by the law it is required, that they have to ensure subcontractors go and comply with the wage law of India, by law. None of them ever go and figure out that, whether the subcontractor is actually complying with the law. Actually, the employee is getting paid with the law. Forget about that. I will name it and then go and, figure it out. You are press guys, go figure it. Ask RBI. When they subcontract for accountants or fresher, through third party, through partners, do they actually ensure whether the partner is actually paying minimum wages to the accountant. This is RBI. This is my regulator. Forget about the companies in India. And I can tell you, I have proof that I have transitioned about 1,000 employees from MNCs to my company, and they were not being paid minimum wages. They were not being paid PF. They were not being paid ESI. Forget about accidental insurance and all. What reforms are we talking about? If you can't take care of your people, how are you going to build really great company? We cannot be forced. SEBI is 100% wrong when it just keeps on saying, I need to really get money to the investors. Because you are setting this company on a path of greed where they go and suck the blood out of the employees. My initiation into one part of my services business was a day before I was taking over that business from a very large MNC. Number one, number two company of India as far as IT is concerned. One of the employees which I was taking over met with an accident. His leg was amputated. You know how he was taken to the hospital? Employees actually contributed money to take that guy to the hospital. He didn't have any ESI. He didn't have any accidental insurance. That's corporate India for you. And what the hell Mr. SEBI is doing and what the rest of the industry is doing about it. You know, we have to really get out of political correctness and fix the problems. We are not taking off our 90% of our employees, and it's not IT. Indian corporate is not IT. 90% of our employees earn less than 10,000 rupees. You come to Manesar and you see how the employees are getting treated. Dr. Gupta, you mentioned about HR manager getting burnt or getting killed in Maruti. Oh, it's a very sad, episode which has happened. But you know what was the trigger for that episode? The trigger for that episode was 7.5 minutes is given to the laborer to really go in a break, to go get his tea, go to the washroom and come back on his platform, on his workstation. And if he doesn't come back on his workstation in 7.5 minutes, his salary is docked. That's corporate India for you. Heartless. 7.5 minutes, and look at you. Can you imagine the queue which would be there if all the guys are going in for that 7.5 minute break for using the washroom? Now, this is how you're building, and there are no reforms happening. No one talks about these things. You come to Manesar, I had my headquarters in Manesar. I was the only company feeding my employees lunch and dinner, and I was the only company giving them a shade to have lunch. The rest of the companies over there, they leave like cattle. They leave the employees on the road as cattle to go and feed. Who's reforming that corporate? No one. That's about the people. Let's talk about the customers. How we treat our customers here, you know, particularly service industry. Look at how I get treated by. I am since 2003, since I came back from US, I'm an Airtel customer, and a very high-paying Airtel customer. For almost about 15, 17 years, very high-paying. My bill would run into 25,000 rupees a month. I have never got a call from all these guys ever. Mr. Vidyarthi, how are you? Any problems? Ever. That's customers for you. What kind of a corporate are you building? They don't take care of customer. In fact, my experience with Airtel was, it so happened they gave me two broadband lines in my Manesar facility. They promised me something. They promised me static IP. They didn't give me static IP. They kept on charging for it despite not providing service. That's how we take care of our customers. Just yesterday, there's a couple of days, essentially, I posted a post on LinkedIn. An amputee, both his hands are amputated. His laptop conked off just before a day of his exam. And he wasn't provided any service, essentially. This guy writes with his amputated hands. And this is top IT company. So what are we talking of reform? Nobody is talking about how you want to really, you talk about consumer protection. Have you ever looked at how consumer protection works? Who's going to talk about those reforms? Let's talk about vendor partners. Tell me which company doesn't actually take Really take the vendors to the cleaners in this country. Tell me the best, you name the best company. Whichever company comes to your name. You name Tata's. They did add on Diwali after promising to pay me 3 crore rupees, they didn't pay. On Diwali. That's the best of the best of your industry. And everybody has heard about the rest of the guys, the Reliances, etc., etc. No, they run the business on vendors' money. Where is the protection for them? Where is the protection for vendors? Out of my 42 customers, 2 customers would pay on time. 2 customers. None of the specifically none of the Indian companies ever paid on time. You can pick any vendor. I will not even talk about the known culprits. Mr. Reliance Communication ate 5 crore of my rupees, never returned to me. 5 crores. For a company, at that point in time, I was a 45 crore company. And there's none of you folks actually talk about really, how do you really reform? You have a MSME stuff, MSME, and then you talk about surround. We keep taking from the surround. Surround, I means, the whole environment. We keep taking from the environment. We never give back, essentially. Polluting industry, who's responsible? I mean, SEBI says, "Yeah, investor, you have to protect investor ko baad mein jaye, environment." That's why we are in the situation where we are. And finally, all of you have already talked about shareholders. So of course, we need to really take care of the shareholders, but those are the 4 things before shareholders you really take. Specifically, I come to MSME. There are 2 sectors in India. Until you fix those 2 sectors, all you guys who work in top industries, you can break your head, you can do what you want. We are going to be a pathetically poor country for another 100 years. And those 2 sectors which you need to fix is agriculture, where 50% of my workforce works, 30% of our GDP, 18% directly, 15% indirectly comes from agriculture. And the second largest sector is MSME, where about 17-18% workforce, which is completely broken. Completely broken. Where if you don't have a thrive, I come from I used to work in a $27 billion manufacturing.
Please be brief.
I'll just take a couple of minutes. $27 billion manufacturing company, which is world's 3rd largest manufacturing services company. They have a factory in Pune, which they built on their own without any government. They hired people from the villages, trained them on manufacturing. They're world's one of the best quality. Their name is spoken with respect. Goel is the name of the company. By all IT companies, essentially. I was representing Goel during Congress time, essentially when EDSM was launched, which was predecessor of Make in India. And I told them, you keep asking us to come and invest. For us to come and invest is a no-brainer. We had 70 factories in the world, 40 in China, 1 in India. It's a no-brainer. The problem is not that. When we established our factory in Pune, we couldn't find a quality screw maker. We are giant SMT guys. We don't make screws. We don't make packaging. That has to come from MSME. Completely broken MSME. We had to really get our vendors from Korea to come and establish these industries here, and we funded their establishment. You haven't done anything about MSME. That is a completely broken segment. There is no quality. Their products, except for automobile products, are 3rd-rate products. They can't stand scrutiny. They can't compete globally. And unless you bring huge amount of reforms in MSME, this country ain't good. Agriculture and MSME, this country is not doing anything. Those are the reforms. When we talk about corporate reforms, we should really get our head together. Specifically, all the guys who are sitting on all these boards, trust me, folks, you are not going anywhere. I've seen the best in the world. I've worked on 3 continents. I worked in Asia Pacific and Singapore, in Europe and US. We are nowhere in terms of where we should be as far as global competitiveness.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vidyarthi, for giving your views with we can understand the pain and agony and anger, which is really the fact. Basically, my questions are based on that. Thank you very much. Paucity of time. Now I go directly to my question and answer, and I want a 30-second maximum 1 minute answer because we are paucity of time now. Mr. Ramnath Pradeep, this in the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, we bought it for the reform or just to favor those big business houses. They are just entering big entry, backdoor entry, killing the market, killing those companies who are ready to revive the companies. But this code was made only to give the backdoor entry with the big groups. We have seen Ruchi Soya. We have seen many other companies. What you say about this, Mr. Ramnath Pradeep? 30 seconds, please. Mr. Pradeep?
I don't think he is there.
Mr. Pradeep, are you there? Okay. Okay. Mr. Kannan, can you reply this?
No, the reform was brought with good intention only.
Mr. Kannan, can you reply on this?
Yeah. So the insolvency reform was brought with good intention only. In fact, compared to the earlier resolution mechanisms, the percentage of recovery is much better. In fact, in
what recovery you are talking? For 4,300 crores was paid by Ramdev to the company or to the banks, and the banks, and that again the loan was taken. Now he's bringing out the public issue. So this is nothing but, and that's why I wanted to know from Mr. Ramnath Pradeep. One side we are talking of reforms. What reform it is? This is not a reform. It is just giving backdoor entry to the big corporates or the big houses which are close to the government.
Nobody has stopped anybody to participate in the process. Mr.
Pradeep, the ground reality is very different.
No. That ground reality is not a different. This is a transparent process which has been adopted under the provisions of the IBC, and it has gone. It is unfortunately it has gone to the people who are interested in building their own industry. So there is nothing wrong. Entire process has been very transparent under the IBC Act. So this is not going a backdoor entry or anything. You ask, I know both I know Ramdev.
Okay. Thank you. So according to you.
So,
okay, sir. Thank you. Mr. Dr. Naveen Gupta. Dr. Naveen Gupta, we are talking about the CSR. You have also mentioned CSR. What CSR? Now the CSR is for the private funds. Earlier it was for the social work. The PM Care Fund is not a government fund. It is not a fund which is, and it's a private fund. What we are talking, this is corporate reforms, Dr. Gupta. Please unmute.
No, corporate CSR, personally, I feel it should not be mandatory. But as Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi has spoken already, business means what? There are stakeholders. The society as a whole is also a stakeholder. Now look at कि हम किस तरह के प्रोडक्ट को प्रमोट कर रहे हैं, तो कौन इसमें गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन चाहिए या खुद से इसमें चाहिए कि गुटखा पान मसाला
okay
promoting
Gupta, I have
like Ajay Devgan.
Thank you Mr. Kannan. Now very 30 seconds only. Too much laws and compliance are benefiting only to big corporates. Earlier CCI used to be there. When SEBI came, so many, you say minor shareholders should also have this thing. Why not in parliament? Why not in political science, political arena? Why only for the corporates? You are killing the small companies. You are just favoring the big corporates, like earlier the Jamidars were favorite. Now this government is favoriting big. 30-second reply, please.
Yeah, in fact, large corporates are saying this too many laws are actually, it's very costly for them. And CFOs are not able to spend time to meet all these reporting requirements. It is not true that all of them are benefiting.
Okay.
This may be true in one or two sectors, but not everywhere.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi, all disclosures for corporates, what about government? Government is charging educational cess. And where they are applying their compliance, whether they are giving those figures in the budget, that this much education cess has come, this much was given to this particular university or this institute. Are they also doing the same disclosure, or only for the corporates all these laws are there just to extract and kill those and give the benefit to the big corporates. And I 100% agree with you. Not a single big corporates are above the board. Whether it is a Reliance, whether it's Infosys, whether it is Tata, they all are doing hanky-panky. We know I will keep a program, I can give all the examples, with the examples, how they are doing hanky-panky. 30 seconds, Mr. Sanjay, with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I forgot to really add, where is the transparency? Where is the transparency in the government? Even corporate, there's no transparency in corporate, there's no transparency in government. Clearly, all the stuff, transparency should be number one issue as far as corporate.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for the paucity of the time.
No,
thank you. Viewers, we have seen today, we are talking about the corporate reforms. Yes, corporate reforms are required, but as one of the panelists said, it should be for everyone, for all those stakeholders. Why only for the investors only? Investors have put the money. That is his choice. It's like a gambling. If you are playing cards, why you are putting that money in that? You invest, be buyer, beware. It's a formula. So why only for the investor? It should be for all the stakeholders, especially the employees, which are the main creator of the corporates. But and the transparency, when you require all the regulations on the corporates, why not on the government? Whether it's a central government or the state government or the municipal corporations or the gram panchayats, everyone should be above board. Then only we can talk about the corporate reforms in India. So thank you very much. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global, Karu News, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Now se Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, Gyan, as well as for show live on Facebook and YouTube. And I endeavor to bring to you every day new topic in our media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 am. Tomorrow our topic is food that protects from disease. And our panelists are Dr. Rajiv Anand, Senior Psychiatrist and Marriage Counselor, Mumbai, Miss Sarita Vasne, Consultant Nutritionist, Meerut, Dr. Zeni Nanda, Endodontist, Mumbai, and Miss Evni Parekh, Senior Practicing Food Therapist and Fitness Consultant, Mumbai. So please tune in tomorrow for media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 am. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramnath Pradeep. Thank you very much, Mr. Mr. R. Kannan. Thank you very much, Dr. Naveen Gupta. And thank you very much, Mr. Sanjay Vidyarthi, for giving your very enlightened views. I know that today the time was short for this type of topic. We require more time, but paucity of time. But definitely we will do one more program in which we will highlight how the big corporates are fooling the country and